This is the Nobel Podcast, where we talk about how to optimize your technology, life, and mind. We're joined by special operations veterans, entrepreneurs, investors, and others who have overcome difficulty to make it to the top of their craft by staying in the fight.
All right. Welcome to the Nobel Podcast. I'm Rob Huberty. I'm here with Jim Vesterman. MARSOC, Wharton, in an order that is unusual. Search funds, starting your own business, raising your own money, doing everything that you could do, transitioning from the service to business, and probably one of the best way possible is one of the best role models, probably the big success of search funds. Welcome. Thank you for coming by and talking with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So let's get started. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in New Jersey, on the New York side of New Jersey, Piscataway, New Jersey. Spent my first 18 years there, went to Piscataway. Undergrad, I went to Amherst College in Massachusetts.
That's like a liberal arts college, isn't it?
Small liberal arts, 425 people per class.
Why did you choose that?
At that time in my life, I wanted to be in a small classroom. I went to a high school with 2,000 people. I wanted to be in a classroom with 15 people and be able to interact with the professor and, know everyone in my class and be able to play the sports that I wanted to play. So
What sports did you play growing up?
So growing up, I did, as a kid, I did everything. And then in high school, I was a swimmer and I did the pole vault.
The weirdest thing that you possibly could do. That's awesome.
Pole vault is a great.
How did you get into a pole vault?
I wanted to be a diver. And in fact, in college, I joined the diving team. But I wanted to throw myself through the air. There was no diving team in Piscataway High School. Probably still isn't today. And so I thought, pole vault looks like a lot of fun.
I feel like not that many people probably participate in that.
We had two.
How do you learn to do that?
We didn't even have a coach. We had to learn on our own. Actually, a guy had transferred into my high school, and he had done pole vaulting at a private school.
Okay.
And he taught me.
Did you become a good pole vaulter?
I went to states.
Oh, okay.
Almost broke the record in my high school.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
So good success.
Yeah, so it was pretty good.
Were you a good kid growing up, or did you get in trouble?
No, I was a pretty good kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked hard. I think one of the best things about growing up, which actually led me to the Marine Corps, and we can talk about that. My parents had a summer house east of Albany in the little mountains with a little lake. And we just would run around, play manhunt in the woods, shoot guns.
What's manhunt?
Manhunt's like hide and seek with teams, and you can jailbreak. It's a really good version.
So we called that running man, but you would physically grab the person, have to take them back to a base. Is that what you did?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You take them back to the jail, then you could break people out of jail.
Right. That's a good game. That's like one that you would play kind of at dark at night. The parents would call everybody at home, for dinner when it was getting dark out.
We would play after dinner in the middle of the pitch black in the middle of the night. But having that escape from suburbia, from suburban New Jersey, to this place where there's no one around, there were, 42 families, and we got to just be off on our own and run around and be boys. That was a nice contrast to growing up in essentially pure suburbia.
Piscataway, I feel like I've driven past that. Is that like exit 13 or something like that? I drive past it all the time.
Depends on the
direction, right.
Parkway.
So you went from, being a good kid going through that, going to Amherst, and you said, where did the Marine Corps enter your mind at that point?
I don't really have a military family, but I thought to myself, I want to do special operations. I didn't even know what special operations was. So when I got to college, the only one I had ever heard of was the Navy SEALs. So I called the Navy SEAL recruiter. He said, if you do this, this is your career. This is, you spend your entire career in this.
Right.
And I thought, I really would like to do this, but I don't want to spend my entire career doing this. So I just kind of shoved it in the back of my mind and just kept it in the back of my mind. The military is a bureaucracy at the end of the day. So I just did enough research that I found the loopholes and found that I decided I wanted to be in the Marine Corps. So I enlisted at 31. And I had to get an age waiver.
So after that, what was the rest of your pipeline like?
So then I went back to the unit, still in RIP. Soon thereafter, got chosen to go to Recon School. Went to Recon School. At the time, there were two. One was called, East Coast was called ARS, Amphibious Reconnaissance School. West Coast was called BRC. So I went to ARS up in Fort Story, which is,
Yeah.
exactly. And so went to Recon School, made it through, then waited for my slot at dive school, and then did SEER school. And we did the same SEER school up in Maine. I did East Coast Maine.
Were any of those kind of standouts to you where you either learned something or were more challenging perhaps than you thought?
Recon School was tough. It was a ball breaker for sure, but you get used to it. You get used to anything. And so actually a lot of people quit, at least at that time. I don't know how it is today, but at that time, a lot of people quit in the first few days. They just thought, I'm never going to get through this. You get used to it, gets a little bit better, and you just stick it out. Put one foot in front of the other.
Are there any takeaways from that of learning that attrition that's really high in the beginning? Was there a mindset that you think you had going through that was valuable?
Yeah, I think no plan B. I am going to make it, no plan B. So you can't even quitting. It's dangerous if quitting crosses your mind. So having no plan B is very useful.
That's pretty good. So I think for what strikes me is that you actually had a timeline in your head, because I was just like, I want to go do this thing. And I didn't have any timeline. I want to go to war as soon as I can. But you're literally, school starts in August or whatever it is. I got to be there then.
So we hadn't even invaded Iraq at that point.
Right.
Or just as I finished Recon School, we'd probably invaded Iraq. And then it was pretty clean in the beginning. Then the insurgency started. So I got eventually cut to the reserves, finished all that school, 15 or so months, got cut to the reserves in August of 2003. And the insurgency was starting.
Right.
And so then I started my first semester at Wharton, and lo and behold, around November, you get the call, hey, you need to come back to active duty. We're going out in January. So luckily I finished the first semester. At least I could end on a semester.
Right.
Finished the first semester, went back to active duty. We did a little workup January, half of February, and then shipped out February 2004.
So, I mean, your trajectory is so up and down. It's insane. So what was that first deployment like?
That's my only deployment. It was obviously a shock going into country.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Where did you get off on the plane? And what was that moment, like the first minute in country? Because I vividly remember it every single time. And I find it so off-putting. Was that super off-putting to you as well? The smells, the heat, the whatever, it just depends on when you landed, where.
So at that point in time, everyone was flying into Kuwait.
Okay.
Because you had to get acclimated.
Right.
And get issued, your gear and the Humvees and everything. So we spent probably 3 weeks or so in Kuwait, and then drove in. So we drove up toward Baghdad and then headed into Anbar.
What was that drive like?
So I was the gunner. We didn't even have enough up armored Humvees at that point. So we had literally sandbags, and we're welded on our own little steel siding. And all we would hear about is IEDs and ambushes. And so we're driving. It took us a couple days to drive through Iraq. And I was the lowest ranking guy on my team. At that point, I think I was a corporal or something like that. And it is kind of embarrassing. But the intel we got was they're going to take shots at you from the overpasses.
Right.
And so I, as the gunner, would target it on the overpasses and then turn around and make sure we're covering the overpasses so we don't get hit from behind. And at one point, I don't know, day 1, 4 or 5 hours into it, I turn around and the ammo can starts to flap in the wind. It starts to go. And I literally ducked. Thought we were taking incoming fire. it was kind of embarrassing. But
I think going into country, very little is taught to you. Even I went through a really great training pipeline, and it was great. And we did a lot of real training and some of the best that you possibly can get. We stole, training sets before my first appointment. That Dam Neck, the tier 1 assets we're doing, we got to go do trips on that because where we were going and where our mission set was. And even coming into country with all the role players and helicopters and doing it in the middle of cities, and we got awesome training. I had never seen the local police and knowing that's Iraqi police. You're like, we never trained that. I almost shot a guy on my first mission. Like I was off safe, starting to pull the trigger, and my shooting buddy or whatever you want to call it was like, whoa, 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 whoa. that guy's not a bad guy. You're like, that's what a bad guy looks like.
Yeah.
He was like, no, that's Iraqi police. They're kind of all over the place. You're saying guys with AK-47 just kind of walk around? Like, yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so like the first time you get off of a plane, you think there's more danger at an airport than there is. You're landing, I was after landing C-17s in Baghdad. That whole airport's safe. I mean, stuff gets shot at, but it's not until you get to the point where you're going. And that route, yeah, it is dangerous, but most of it is not. So going into it, what's in your head and the truth are different things.
Totally.
I'm still going through Saving Private Ryan in my head, or the movies and all of it, the brainwashing that I've had up to that point, and then seeing, oh, it's different than what I thought.
Totally.
And so hearing that doesn't surprise me at all. That's not embarrassing. It just depends on the reaction. If you shot through the whole ammo can, well,
I didn't shoot the empty overpass.
Right, okay. Right. So we don't have to get into the weedies, all of what that deployment was like. But what were some learning experiences of that deployment that you went on, and how did that shape you for the future?
Yeah, so we started out at Al Assad, and then eventually moved. At that point in time, there was Al Qaim, which was closer to the border with Syria, and then Husayba. We had a very small Marine Corps base on the border with Syria in a pretty bad, on a per capita basis, a very bad town. So I mean, just getting used to just having an adrenaline high that's way up here. That was interesting life learning experience. I don't know if this happened to you guys, but something that happened fast forwarding. So in our town, in the Husayba, probably 4 or 5 IEDs would go off every day. And we'd get, at least for the first 3/4 of it, we got either mortared or rockets 3 times a day, every day.
Right.
And so all these bombs are going off and you're getting used to it, to kind of figure out, is this close enough to you that it's actually directed toward you or not? But then something actually happened that I realized only coming back, which was I came back to the U.S. at the end of the deployment, and I could feel changes in air pressure, which I can't feel anymore. But if this door were to open or that window were to open, the air pressure would change. And what I realized was when these bombs go off, and then I eventually looked this up, the air pressure hits you, travels slightly faster than the speed of sound. So the air pressure hits you just before you hear it. And so I became accustomed to feeling changes in air pressure and thinking a bomb's about to go off because it was just associated like this. So I came home, and for the first 3-4 weeks, every time a door opened, every time a window opened, I'd feel it and I'd be on alert.
Hypersensitivity.
Hypersensitive. Then eventually that goes away because then there's no bombs.
It's a powerful thing when people are trying to kill you.
Yes.
And in terms of what you do to cope with that, your ability to survive and your instinct, and when you're doing it at a high level, and when you enjoy it, I think that adrenaline, I think a lot of the people who choose to do that and do it at a high level enjoy it, and that hypersensitivity and that lifestyle, when you come back and it's gone, there's disappointment and you're alert and you kind of jumpy, and then you're not, and it's a weird transition.
Yeah. And one thing I found that was very interesting was, my first time in combat. Yes, we do a lot of great training, but your first time in combat, I think the ease with which, or the rapidity with which you switch from, hey, they're trying to kill me, well, I'm trying to kill them before they kill me. That switch happens. Survival happens very fast.
I think with the first exposure.
Right. And I didn't do it again, so I don't know what it would be like going back the second time.
The speed in which I think that new people the first time ever got shot at, they're shooting at me. And then it takes a little bit to be like, oh, I have to do something right now. And I think that the more you do it, you are more aggressive, and you're not going to take rounds before you shoot rounds, I guess.
Yeah. No, well, I was referring to more of the like, we're in America.
Right.
We don't have to think about survival.
Right.
Most of this country, the thought never crosses their mind. Survival mode. But when you're there and they are trying to kill you, that switch of surviving and killing them before they kill you, that happens, at least for me, it happened really quick,
Right.
surprisingly smoothly. It's a natural instinct.
Right. I mean, we've been warring for thousands of years, like all of human history.
Totally.
Being peaceful is maybe unique.
Yes.
And is a good thing. And it's hopefully no one has that feeling in the United States. I mean, some people do, but
yes,
for the most part, it's pretty safe.
Yes.
So you're going through this. You've vacillated from like, you're going to school, you go through the training pipeline, you go back to school, then they call you up for war, you go to war, have, an experience that's unlike any other, and then you go back to school.
Yeah, that was tough.
That
was probably the toughest transition, is coming back from Iraq. We had maybe a month or so transition before I went back to school. That was a tough transition.
I mean, that's crazy. And the news were crazy at that point too. I'm sure the whole world was still watching that, and that was still a lot more centered and focused.
Yeah, for us, right? And to us, it means something. And that was one of the things that struck me the most was coming back, and then they, cut you and you got a couple weeks off, and just going to a restaurant and seeing people laughing and drinking and thinking, wait, what about us?
What was a living condition that you experienced when you were there?
Over there?
Over in Iraq.
I was very different. So Al-Assad was very comfortable. You had a bed. But when you got to Al-Qaim, you had a cot with 20 guys. And when you got to Husayba, we actually had a mattress there. That was nice. But we were in some makeshift little wooden building with sandbags on the top and toilets outside.
So you get to taste all of it there.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And then you come back. So you got, good, safe, not so safe, terribly unsafe. And then you come back to the United States, and what kind do you want, red or white?
That's right. That's right.
I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a shock, but you get used to, for better and for worse, you get used to anything.
So you come back, you're going back to school. What did you want to pursue at that point? So you just had a life-changing experience, I would argue. And then you come back. MBAs are kind of transitional degrees anyway. Usually you go in with one job and you come out with a different one. But you went in with multiple different jobs. You had a part-time job in the middle of, which was going to war, which is crazy. What did you want to get out of that? What was next?
So have to rewind all the way back to that year that I took off and lived in Italy. And one of the things that I did there was I took the time to reflect on what it is that I wanted to do someday. So I had 4 years of consulting experience, but I kind of sat back and thought, what do I like and what do I not like? What do I think I'm good at? What do I think I'm not good at? And I realized at that point in time, I don't want to be on the advisory side of business. I don't want to be a consultant. I don't want to be an investment banker. Someday, when it's the right time for me, I want to run my own business. I want to, reap the rewards and suffer the consequences of my decisions and actions. So at that point in time, I realized I want to do that someday. I also thought, I don't feel that I'm ready to do that. For me, and everyone's different, for me, I wanted to have other experiences in place before I did that. So when I went back to the consulting firm, I moved over to the private equity consulting side of the business to learn buyouts. Then I went to a software startup for a couple of years to see what a startup was like. Business school was a piece of my puzzle. I wanted to fill in my holes that I was missing from a finance perspective and other elements. So I went to business school. So then at that point in time, now I'm in business school, and I had one more thing that I wanted to do before I went off on my own. I wanted to have a Fortune 500 operating experience. So I had seen startups. I wanted to see Fortune 500. Someday I'm going to run my own business. I want to build it from this to that. So after business school, that's what I did. I got a Fortune 500 operating experience in a $5 billion company and kind of saw what that was like. And after 3 years of that, I thought, I think I'm ready. I'm ready to go off on my own and try to run my own business.
One of the pieces of advice or the things that I talk to veterans transitioning about is you named, I don't think that a lot of veterans know what they like. And that you thought and you contemplated this as part of a gap
Reflection.
year. It wasn't necessarily a gap year, but that idea. You took downtime and kind of a self-discovery
Yes.
that I think a lot of people don't do. And I think it's really weird that you could do a 20-year career and at a very high level, you could be at the most elite of organizations in the military, having the highest operational tempo, and maybe you're extremely talented at it, but you don't know what you like. And so when someone asks that, they're like, I don't even know how to answer that question. I just do what is in front of me, and I am, the dog to war. Like, I go. Well, what do you do when nothing is driving you and you're not at the elite organization? Like, I have no idea. And so finding what you like is actually, I think, a profound thing.
And what you don't like.
Right.
Because you can eliminate a lot of options by knowing what you don't like.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's very important to take the time to reflect. You have to have a little bit of solitude, I think, to do that. It's hard to do that when you're in the day-to-day. But finding some time for some solitude and reflecting. And yeah, I think knowing what you don't want to do is super helpful.
What did you learn from a bigger company? What did you take away that you did like and that you did not like at a big company?
So I would say a couple things. I ended up working for Toll Brothers because I thought, I'd love to learn real estate. I might do a business eventually in real estate. I'd love to learn real estate. Toll Brothers is the nation's leading provider of high-end residential. So I thought, I'll get this Fortune 500 experience. I'll learn real estate at the same time. Maybe I'll do a business in real estate, maybe not. But in any case, I'm going to get this experience. So I learned a few things. One, when you get to that $5 billion level, they really have it mapped out. Like, there was a book, and the book had every step of everything, and it was well done. You can do it poorly, but this was well done. This is, if you want to do this, this is how you do it. This is every step to it. So they had really worked through their processes. It wasn't ad hoc. They knew what their processes were. So that was one thing good to see, which you don't have in a startup, or even if you buy a small company, none of that exists. You have to develop all that stuff. What's the HR policy for this? And it's not there. You have to develop it.
I asked somebody early, when do you hire the first HR person? And this is a telling thing. He says, not until you get sued for over $1 million.
Yeah.
That was like he was joking. It was not really
which might be a little too late.
That's right. And you're just like, okay, I don't know that that's great advice, but cool.
Yeah.
And because there's not a great answer for something like that.
Yes. I would say the second thing that I learned was that I happened to join Toll Brothers in August of 2006. And while everyone says the financial crisis happened in 2008, 2009, it really started in 2006. And I remember Bob Toll, who was the CEO of Toll Brothers, the word went around the company that he went into HR in October, November of 2006, and he said, fire 10% of the company. Because at that point in time, at the end of 2006, he realized what was about to happen. And between the time I joined and the time I left, they fired 70% of the company.
Oh, wow.
So I watched him work through this very difficult time, the worst housing recession in our lifetimes. And I watched him manage the balance sheet and how he was able to keep cash on the balance sheet throughout this crisis. That was a great learning experience. I listened to all of his earnings calls. So I watched him manage a crisis and cash through difficult times, and that was a great learning experience.
That's awesome. So you go through that.
So just a quick aside, Bob Toll unfortunately passed, but he was a great guy. And eventually I worked directly for him, and I would be sent on projects to review acquisitions or operations around the country. And he would have these Monday meetings where he'd bring all the presidents of all the divisions in, and he'd kind of quickly review their territory, et cetera, et cetera. And I would be on this acquisition or in this operations, but I wouldn't be on every one. But sometimes he would say, I'd say I'm not in the next division. He said, that's okay. Sit over there, watch, and you'll learn something. So he was a really great mentor to me. He let me sit there and watch him manage the $5 billion company, manage his presidents in all the different territories. And it was a great learning experience.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What was next?
So I worked there for 3 years. Toward the end of that 3 years, I thought, I think I'm ready. I think now I've done all the things that I wanted to do to feel ready to go off on my own. And thank God I had a friend. So I had gone to Wharton and they didn't have a class on search funds. And so I graduated not knowing that that was an option, thinking, well, I must have to start my own business. And thank God a friend of mine, actually, the guy with whom I currently teach the search fund class at Wharton, said, I've got this article from Stanford Business School on search funds. It's an alternative pathway to entrepreneurship. And I read the article and thought, wow, that's what I want to do. I could start a business, but I don't know if that I'm the best guy to ever start a business. But I'm pretty sure with my strengths and my experience, I can take an existing business, make it better, and grow it. And so when I saw read that search fund study, I thought, that's it. That's what I'm going to do.
So that was a classmate at Wharton?
He was a classmate of mine. We had already graduated.
But you'd stayed in contact
Exactly.
with. So that's what a network, I guess, looks like. That's what they say.
Yeah.
The Wharton, it's people that you went to school that you're friends with.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're talking about this. So describe what the difference between a search fund for people who've never heard of that before.
Yes.
And are less familiar. So you take an existing company, you look to buy it. How do you get the money to buy it?
So search funds are also called Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition. So you can start a business or you can buy a business. And there's a whole ecosystem out there designed for people who want to follow that path. Generally, you have to have gone to business school. Generally, it's not 100%, but generally. And basically, they're looking for people who want to follow this path. They want to run a business. Most 95% have never run a business before. But what this does is it gives you, the reason it's called search funds is because you raise enough money to search for a business for a couple of years. And you're looking for a business with certain characteristics. Generally, highly recurring revenues, greater than 50% recurring revenues, generally with some good EBITDA margins, greater than 20% EBITDA margins. You're looking for highly recurring revenue businesses with an owner that wants to retire. And they give you this cash for usually somewhere around $500,000 that allows you to search for a couple of years and find a business. And then you bring the business to this set of investors who paid for this couple of years. And they get a couple things for this. They get a right of first refusal on a pro rata equity share of the deal that you want to do. So to simplify it, if you go out, you find a business and that business requires a $10 million equity check, and you have 10 investors who funded your search, they each get the option, but not the requirement, to invest $1 million in that deal that you're going to do. They can say no, they can give you zero, they can give you $1, or they can give you $1 million. So that's the first thing that they get. A right of first refusal on a pro rata equity share of the deal that you do. They also get what's called a 50% step up on the search fund. So if they give you, they're called investor units. If they give you a $40,000 investor unit as part of this search, it gets a 50% step up. So it turns into 40,000, turns into 60,000, and that 60,000 will go into the deal that you eventually do as equity. And those are the terms that they get. They also generally get a 1x liquidation preference when you do the deal. So if they give you a total of $10 million, the first $10 million out goes back to them. That's called a 1x liquidation preference. But then at the end of the day, what they get is someone who's very motivated, someone who wants to run a business, who has their eggs all in one basket, which is you're doing this search. This is all you're focused on, running around the country, trying to find a great deal to bring to them, to which they can say no. They can say, oh, no, this is not a good deal for me, or I don't like this deal. So from their perspective, they get those terms, but they get someone running around very focused. And then the thing about search funds is the historical IRRs, the historical compounded annual returns, are very high. They're about 32% IRR. So you put $1 million in, and on average, you get $320,000 a year every year.
It's not terrible.
That's not terrible.
So as you're going into this, you explain it to people who haven't heard it before. How did you go about searching? How did you find investors that were going to support you? What did that look like? I feel like it's probably more mature now. You read on a paper at this point. I know a lot of people who know a lot about it.
Yes.
How did you go about finding people to back you? And then how did you search?
It is more mature at this point, but the process is pretty much the same, which is you start by deciding this is the path for you. Then the second thing you do is you write what's called a private placement memorandum, a PPM. And basically that has two elements to it. The first is you lay out the terms of your search fund. And there are very standard search fund terms. We can talk about that if you want, but there's a set of traditional terms. You lay it out so that the investors that you give this to, they know what terms you're looking for. And if they're standard, then they totally understand them because everyone does that. And then the second piece of it is you say, why you? Why are you the right person to successfully raise a search fund, successfully search, successfully acquire, successfully operate, and successfully exit? Why are you going to be able to get that done? And no one has the perfect story, right?
Yours is not bad. Your story's not bad.
My story's pretty good because I had more experience than the average.
Right. You had done a lot of different things. You had seen, by consulting, you'd seen a lot of companies. By being in a war, I think that tells something about character.
Yes.
I would argue.
And perseverance.
Right. You had seen big companies.
Yep.
You've gone to business school, so you know that you need to buy low and sell high. I mean, I'm joking, but like
exactly.
you had a lot of those things, and the drive, I think they're probably looking for the most.
And that was my pitch.
Right.
That was my pitch. Everyone has a different pitch, but that was my pitch. It was, I've seen and done all the pieces of this puzzle. I want to now bring it all together and do it in a search fund. And, I've been through training and war that, the primary goal is to make people quit. And I didn't quit. So I'm not going to quit here.
So I think that you have one of the biggest successes, and that your name gets brought up, is like, what does searching done right look like? And it's you, and you have the success. So how did you choose? So you get backers. Is there like an interesting story to who backed you and how? Or, do you want to talk about how you actually search? What's more interesting for you?
Maybe I'll give you a little of both. So I said you write this PPM. That's the first thing that you do. And then you send it out to investors. And I had a job at the time, so I decided I'm going to take vacation days and do this. So I'm going to do this systematically across different parts of the country. So I decided I'm going to start in Southern California. I know there's a few investors out there. I'm going to send my PPM ahead of time. Hopefully they'll give me an interview, and that's how I'm going to start. And then I'm going to go to different parts of the country and raise my search fund. So I sent it out to these 3 investors in Southern California, and crickets. No one responds. I thought, this isn't good. And so after a few days of waiting, I called one of them up. His name is Michael O'Connell. And I called him. Michael, my name is Jim Vesterman. I sent you a PPM. And he's a great guy, but he's a little gruff on the phone. And so he said, yeah, I got it. I haven't read it. I'll read it. Click. And I thought, oh boy, this is not starting out as I would have hoped it would. And then the next day, he sends me an email and he said, I'm very impressed. Where should I wire the money? And I thought, oh, now this is good. Now he's the first guy. That's not the normal way they do it. They call you in, they interview you, they check your references. But for him, he said, where do I send the check?
That's pretty good. Considering I feel like maybe search funds are a little bit different, but asking for money is hard.
Yeah.
And you get told no such a high degree that it hurts.
Yes.
There's a lot of failure in there, and you have to pick yourselves up a lot. You get told. I've been told no a lot.
Yes. I'll tell one story, and I'm not saying necessarily to follow this, but this was an important part of my puzzle. So I was searching for tech-enabled services businesses. That's what I liked. I like the scalability. I like the recurring revenues element of it. So I was searching for that. About 18 months into it, I hadn't closed on anything yet. I had had a few deals and things that got close but fell apart. About 18 months into it, I came across a deal. It wasn't tech-enabled services. It hit all the criteria of search funds, but it wasn't tech-enabled services. But I thought, I'm going to run out of money here eventually. I should dig into this deal. So I get it under LOI, letter of intent, and I start marching toward close. And, every 2 weeks I'd get some diligence back, and it would either be mediocre or not so great, not deal killing diligence, but mediocre. And another 2 weeks, mediocre, drip, drip, drip. And I get to the finish line, and I actually sent it out to my investors, 80% of whom said, yeah, sign me up. The deal had good characteristics to it generally. But one of my investors, who was one of the smartest guys, his name is Bill Egan, he said no. And I called him up and I said, Bill, I've got all the money raised, but I'm just curious, why did you say no to this deal? And he said, Jim, I like you, but you and I are here to do great deals. And this is it's just a good deal. It's not a great deal. So I'm out. And I thought, so I thought for a day or so, and I thought, you know what? He's right. I only had 4 months of search cash left, so I knew I was going to run out of cash. But I thought, you know what? He's right. I'm here to do a great deal. And so I walked away from that deal. Basically, all I had to do was sign the paper, and I would have closed. But I walked away. And again, I'm not saying everyone should do this. I had to go through the painful process of re-raising more search capital. So I said, listen, this is really what I want to do to my investors. I'm cooking with gas. Give me 1 more year and I'm going to find something. And enough of them said yes, that I got another year's worth of search capital.
That is some personal courage right there.
It was a tough decision. Then 2 months after re-raising this capital, I find Raptor Technologies. Great deal. And I'm cooking with gas at this point. I know exactly what I'm doing. I jump all over that deal. I tie it up under LOI as quickly as I can. 90 days later, I close the deal, and it was the best thing I ever did.
That is personal courage kind of leading through to success. So you close that deal. We are super familiar with Raptor, but discuss what that is.
Sure. So Raptor at the time had one product. It was visitor management for K-12 schools. So even today, you can go into some K-12 schools and they just have a sign-in piece of paper where, you could sign my name and I could sign your name and no one would know the difference. So what Raptor did and still does today is provide visitor management software for K-12 schools. So instead of signing on a piece of paper, you give your ID. It runs the ID, runs an instant sex offender background check, an instant custody check, an instant ban visitor check, all in a half of a second. And now you have much better security going in and out of the schools. So that's what I bought. The guy had founded it, ran it for 10 years, wanted to retire.
So all those things that you were talking about, what is a good search thing that,
the criteria.
The criteria, yeah.
It hit my criteria in almost every respect. It had highly recurring revenues, around 70% subscription SaaS revenues. It was a SaaS business, single source, multi-tenant SaaS business, which is like the best. So 70% recurring revenues. It had 40% EBITDA margins, which is impressive. It had around 2 million in EBITDA, which is a good amount of EBITDA, not too big, not too small. An owner that wanted to retire, a great purpose, to help protect kids, and a wide open market. At the time, Raptor, we served 7,000 schools, and there's 130,000 K-12 schools in America. And if you added up our competition, at the time they maybe served 8,000 schools, so that was 15,000 of the 130,000 had software, and 115,000 did not. So it was a huge greenfield opportunity, and we just ran at it and did a lot of investment in sales and marketing, invested in new products, and just really, really grew the company.
So you acquire the company, you're now the CEO. What was that transition like? Because as you're going into this, you have the ideas of this is where I need to take it, and you're not a small idea guy. You proved that. Like, this isn't a good, I'm going to do great things. So you go in with the idea that you're going to do something great with this.
Yes.
What was that like, taking over a business when somebody else has run it? You're the new shoes to fill. Was everybody excited? Was it deflating? What was it like going in that new environment right away?
Yeah, I don't know that the employees were so excited. They kind of liked their life. This was a founder. He's a great guy. He did end up like putting a TV on everyone's desk. Like they would come in and they could watch TV all day on their desk. I switched that out pretty quickly to be like call queue for the customer support. People didn't really like that too much.
Not as
but
fun.
Not as fun, but it was good. He and I had and have a great relationship. So he stepped back right away, but he was very supportive. I could call him for anything. He was there when I needed him. But I just started, building what my vision was for this company, which is a professional, fast-growing SaaS business that's gonna just try to be as what we call ourselves today, the gold standard of school safety.
What was that like? How many years did you go through that process? What were some of the ups and downs of running that?
Yeah, so I ran the company for 8.5 years. It was a single source multi-tenant SaaS system, and it crashed a lot. And he didn't hide that fact. He told me that the system has been crashing pretty much for the 10 years of existence.
Which would say what? When you go in, you scan your ID and it prints out a badge with your ID card and it searches like, are you a sex offender or something like that?
Well, the software itself would crash so that every single user could not use the software.
Okay. That's tough.
The whole system would go down. Okay. And I counted, and in the first 52 weeks, the system crashed 42 times.
Okay.
And it didn't crash at 3 a.m. when no one was using it. It crashed at like peak usage times when there was a line down the hallway of visitors trying to get in. So that was very
at least
painful.
You knew what the problem was. How did you address that problem?
Yeah. And I didn't know. He didn't know how to fix it, right? I didn't know how to fix it. I'm not a software guy, but we just put our head down, and slowly but surely, after 6 months, we found the first real key problem within the software that was crashing it. Took us another 6 months to find the second one, fix that. Things are starting to stabilize. And then another 6 months, we found the third one. And then after that, we had 99.99% uptime. But it was a tough first 18 months.
Going into that to solve that problem, was that deflating where you're like, this is not going to go well for me? Or was it not that severe where you're like, I know that I'll make this work?
It wasn't deflating because I was still super motivated. I knew when I saw the company, and I knew from sitting in the chair on day one, this is a great company. And the system had been crashing for 10 years, and they had 95% gross logo retention. Crashing for 10 years,
and it's still everybody
and 95% gross logo retention.
It's still valuable.
That means you've got something. And I thought, we've got something here. We just have to fix this stuff. And we ended up rewriting the entire software thing from scratch, which solved a lot of issues, including the crashing. And then it built a scalable model and made it 21st century and look and feel. But I wasn't deflated. I was anxious. I was tired, but I wasn't deflated because I knew this was a great business.
So as you grew that, I imagine you took some of his culture, but did you create your own culture there? Was that one of the important things as you came into it?
It was important to me. I wanted to build a professional, growth-oriented, do the right thing culture that was very clear. So one of the great things I got out of the Marine Corps was the Marine Corps has a very clear, articulated, consistent culture. So that was a great learning from the Marine Corps to see that this can be done. And then I had professional experiences where I realized that, I'm moving toward that Fortune 500 company. I don't want to be a bureaucracy, but I want to be a professional culture. And then I think probably you guys know as well as I do, you want to get people in there who are growth oriented like you. They want to grow. You want people that want to grow, not people that want to sit back and have necessarily an easy life. People that want to deal with growth problems, that have an owner's mindset. And so, that's the culture that I wanted to build. And by hiring and by articulating what we were looking for, it took us a while, years to get it all running smoothly. But spent a lot of time on that.
How many employees did you come into?
Acquired with 11. I'm still on the board of Raptor today. It has over 400.
Okay. That's radically different.
Yeah.
But
when I sold and I transitioned out of the CEO position, I think we had 130 or so.
Did you think, because you you had a good mentor in a big company. So you had seen kind of a bigger organization run well through hard times, and you had grown that from, something pretty small to, I mean, at least medium. I don't know. I mean, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
What were the challenges going from that 11 to 130?
You got to spin up.
I'm in the middle of this, so
Yeah.
I'm asking for advice here.
You got to spin up everything. Eventually, it starts to really become a flywheel. But you have to figure out, what recruiters do I use to even start, right? So you have to figure out recruiters. You have to figure out what your pitch is. You've got to bring in high quality people very early on when you're selling a dream. We're crashing 42 times in 52 weeks, and you got to bring in people who are super professional and
believe me anyway,
3 steps ahead of where we are right now. But it can be done by hook and by crook, and you just keep working at it, and then it becomes a little bit of a flywheel. Then you create a great culture, and all the employees are referring all their friends to come in, and you've got recruiters that are working overtime, and it becomes a lot easier.
What are some of the takeaways you did running that company and growing it?
Yeah, I would say we did a couple of things that our competitors did not do. One was we invested heavily in sales and marketing. So when I bought the company, actually the owner was the guy who did sales. When he retired day one, there was no one in sales and marketing. So we invested heavily in sales and marketing and built a great team and a bigger and bigger team. And so while I think a lot of our competitors, who were at the time at least mom and pop shops, they were very content on not paying, for a high quality salesperson and trying to do it themselves and then stick the EBITDA in their pocket. We invested a lot of money in that. So that's one. So we were growing 10 times faster than everyone around us. And then 2, we invested a lot of time in product, a lot of time and money in product. So 1, we spent, $1.5 million in 2 years to rewrite the product from scratch. Then we spent another $1.5 million, another 3 years to write an emergency management product, which had never been done in K-12. So we invented this thing from scratch. And it took a lot of time and a lot of money with a lot of uncertainty. But what we knew was it would create a TAM that was much more attractive for us and for any future buyers that we would sell to. So we created the emergency management product and at the same time a volunteer management product. So we went from having one product to having 3 fully integrated products on a 21st century built into the cloud SaaS platform that looked great, worked great in general, and increased our TAM. Between that and price increases and little kind of product add-ons, we increased our subscription revenue per school by 10x. Our potential subscription revenue per school by 10x.
That's pretty crazy.
Which then becomes attractive to the future buyer, right?
Of course. So as you're doing that, I want to kind of start wrapping things up just to respect your time here. So you have built this company, you're able to kind of exit 8.5 years later, still participate in it. What are lessons learned from the whole thing, and what became next?
Yeah, so after 6.5 years with the search fund investors, I sold it to private equity. And then 1, because I wanted to get some liquidity.
Sure.
And 2, I wanted to bring in some software specialists. So I sold it to a specialist software private equity firm who brought in a lot of their knowledge from 25 years of doing middle market software companies. Ran it for 2 years under them and had a great experience and learned a ton under them. And then just eventually wanted to live other parts of life. So eventually we brought in a new CEO and I moved to Europe for a couple of years.
What was that day like, handing it over to somebody else?
That was tough. It's tough because it's your baby. It's a lot of your identity, but you can't go to cooking school in Paris and run a SaaS company in the US at the same time. And I thought, I want to go to cooking school in Paris.
You can't do both of those at the same time,
Yeah.
I don't think.
No.
So you took some time off, you went to Europe, you traveled, followed that wanderlust that you have.
Yeah, I spent a year in Italy and a year in Paris, going to cooking school and like wine school and language school.
So now what are you doing these days?
So got back and got the opportunity to start the Search Fund Class Award. So even until couple of years ago, we never had a search fund class. I, along with the guy who told me about search funds the first time, we wrote this class from scratch, and now we're teaching a search fund class at Wharton.
That's really exciting. I think that we were talking about this. I would be intimidated, even doing that and have the experiences. Now you have to do it in a way that resonates with students. I know that everybody that I talk to, it's, I talk to Wharton. I live pretty close to campus, and the veteran group particularly, everybody takes your class or wants to get into it because it's hard to get into. But going into that, creating the criteria, creating the curriculum, I guess, is something that, I have not done. Not really. I mean, in the military a little bit, but all that's created for you. How is that experience becoming a teacher, I guess, to some degree, and sharing your experience? How have you enjoyed that?
It's been great. One, it forces you to think about it and then put it all into a lecture and make the arc of the journey of search funds and how to tell that properly. That's been a great challenge. And then the students are so enthusiastic. Search funds doesn't fit everyone, but it does fit some people. And so we're in the class, and there's a lot of people that are they want to do this. They want to learn as much as they can from practitioners so that they can go down this route and avoid some mistakes and do some great things. So the enthusiasm from the Wharton students is off the charts, and it's just a ton of fun.
Awesome. I'm going to ask a few quick questions and then get you on the road. Are there any books that you read that changed your life or were influential to who you are?
That's probably a long answer. I've actually been reading American history in order for about a decade, and a lot of books into it. I started in about 1760. I'm in about 1930. I'm reading the biography of Herbert Hoover, which is more interesting than it might sound. But I read every president and all important people along the whole way. There's so many great books in there, but I would highly recommend the Chernow biography on Washington. Like, we are sitting here today because Washington did a really great job in the midst of chaos. There was no blueprint. He made the blueprint that allows us to function at least as well as we're functioning today, to sit here today.
Right. So which is interesting is Washington lived part of his life right here.
Yes.
Right here. And there's plaques there's a house across the street that he actually did Masonic ceremonies at. He supposedly bought his grain here, right where we're sitting. Washington, this was an area that was important for him.
It's easy to say because everyone knows who Washington is, but he did an amazing job. And I think that Ron Chernow, who wrote the biography on Hamilton, which is also excellent, did a great one on Washington.
Very nice. Are there any movies that you grew up with that influenced you, or whatever? Did you grow up on G.I. Joe? What were reasons where you're sitting here today, and any kind of pop culture things that influenced you?
I don't know. I tell my fiance that my favorite movie is The Game with Michael Douglas, and I forced her to watch it with me, and she's a little scared. That is one of my
I have
movies.
Never heard that referred to. Okay, cool. And then I guess just to end it, anything else that you want to share, and should people go become searchers?
You really have to, it's like joining the military and trying to make it into special operations. It really has to be the right path for you. You really have to know that you want to do this, because it's a hard journey. We didn't get into a lot of the sleepless nights in the search process, as I'm sure you've heard. So it's a really hard journey. So it's a great journey for someone who really wants to do that, and it's the right path for them, but it's not something to take lightly. You got to really do your research before you decide it's the path for you.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it.
That's it for this episode. If you want to check out more from the podcast, head to zeroeyes.com/nobel, where you can see show notes, read more about our guests, and suggest guests or topics of your own. Until next time, stay in the fight. Don't ring the bell.